What was the most cringe-inducing date you ever went to during your dating experience? Oh. The time this guy from my apartment complex politely invited me to watch Titanic in his apartment with him. About 1/3 of the way into the movie, he went to the bathroom and was gone a pretty long time. I finally got up just to see where he went. And lo and behold, there he is, sitting on the corner of his bed. Door open. Jerking off swiftly and furiously. Really beating it. And just implores, "You did this to me. Don't do anything. Just stand there a minute, beat. I had recently gone through a bad breakup and a good friend of mine set me up with one of his close friends. I had met the guy a few times before and thought he was pretty chill. He picked me up for dinner. Was very nice and I was looking forward to the night. At dinner though, he ordered for me. His reasoning was, "I love this place and know you'll love what I got you." Okay. Looked past that, but whenever the waitress would come over and ask me anything, he would answer. I asked him why he kept answering for me, and he stated that it was his job. At this point I am ready for dinner to be over. The bill came and I said I wouldn't mind paying my half, but he insisted. While getting his card out of his wallet, a condom fell out. We both kind of just looked at it for a second. Nothing is really too weird about that. He practices safe sex. Cool. But he had to say something and of course it made me cringe vomit. I'm ready to use this tonight. You. Annoyed and over it, I said. Pass. We didn't talk the whole way back to my house, but before I got out of his car he told me, "Next time, tell a guy you're not interested before he has to pay for your meal." Then he sped off. He was a little more of a jerk than cringe. But to this day I cringe when I think about that date. In my limited dating experience, it would definitely have to be the time I made the mistake of stopping by a gas station to get what they call a steak and cheese ranchero tornado for a snack. Since it was an hour-plus drive to the date and we weren't even eating immediately, going to an arcade bowling alley type place. Then food. This was our third date and things had been off to a somewhat awkward but pretty good start. So I get there and we have all sorts of fun. Playing arcade games. Glow putt. Do some bowling. We decided to go elsewhere to grab some food. Since the food there was pretty mediocre. This was when I started feeling the coming storm. As my stomach loudly protested. We sat down. And at this time my stomach's protests had turned into cramping and an impending pressure in my bowels. I excused myself to the restroom. And proceeded to spend probably 15 to 20 minutes in a splitting toilet shaking terror. When I returned, she looked worried and asked if everything was alright. I told her the entire story. Gas station snack. The runs. And all. She still teases me about it. So, he picks me up and takes me to King Taco, a delicious fast food place. But probably not the best place for a first date. He, nicely, offers to pay. And asks what sauce I want on my taco. Red or green? I tell him red. Instead of accepting my choice, he decides he needs to know why I want red sauce. So I tell him I prefer red. Then he asks why again. This conversation continues for almost a minute before he goes, "I know why you prefer red." By this point I'm annoyed. But curious. Okay, why? Because you're a girl. And you get your period. And your period is red. I was horrified. How did he even come to that conclusion? Why are we talking about periods? I just want my carne asada tacos. I made him take me home after. And didn't return his calls. We were 19/20 at the time. Dates to TGI Fridays with my first boyfriend. He spent the whole hour and a half we were there trying to teach me how to play chess and then getting seriously annoyed with me when I wanted to eat or just talk about anything other than chess. What made it worse was the fact that the woman over at the table next to ours muttered, "At least we're not on an awkward first date like they are to the guy she was with." The kicker is that we'd been together for 2 years at that point. Spoilers, it didn't last. Met some girl on the internet. After talking a little while we discovered we didn't live too far away from each other and arranged to meet up for a few drinks. A few days before we were due to meet up she texts me saying her friend wants to come too because you can never be too careful with meeting people on the internet. I say yeah, that's fine, I'll bring a friend to then. So we meet and she spent the entire time talking to her friend. Tried my best to make conversation but was getting one word answers back. I'll be the first one to admit I suffer from social anxiety, so I'm not saying it was all her fault, but she wasn't making it very easy either. It was the most awkward 2 hours of my life. My friend ended up coming up with some BS excuse why we had to leave. About 6 months later she started texting me again and asks me if I wanna go to dinner. I said why not, as long as it's just you and me. We hit it off big time, ended up being together 8 years. TLDR, worst date of my life ended up turning into my longest relationship. In high school. My freshman year. My parents put me in Catholic school instead of the high school that most of my friends were fed into. So for the first few weeks I sat with random people. Eventually I started hanging around this kid. He had a Nintendo and I did too, so we would sit together and play Nintendo. I had no idea he couldn't hold a conversation for nothing. About a week before homecoming he asks me to be his date. I said hell yeah. It comes to the night of the date. I'm wearing a black dress and my long black hair was straightened by my mom. I'm wearing cute black shoes and my Buddy Holly glasses. He knocked on the door wearing all black and takes me to the back seat of his grandfather's car. We were 14. It was fine. Silence permeated the air on the way there. And his grandfather eventually asked, what the hell do you think you're going to talk about at the restaurant? No answer. At the restaurant. I asked him how getting ready was. He told me the long and drawn out story about how he went snooping through his mom's room. He was trying to find money. Because he wanted to buy a flower. And found his mom's lipstick and not thinking he put it in his mouth. It started buzzing. And he thought that was weird. I had to tell him that he stuck his mom's vibrator in his mouth. Needless to say, this stuck with me. Went on a date to Six Flags. And after the third ride I projectile vomited my breakfast all over his back and arm. We were several minutes away from the nearest bathroom. He wouldn't let me buy him a new shirt, so he smelled like puke all day. We've been married almost a year now. During high school, I went on one date with this guy. 1. He took me to a cemetery because I was a goth and he thought it would get me in the mood. I was weirded out, but tried to stick it out. It was one of my first times going out. We sat on the hood of his car and listened to music. Then he tried to kiss me and touch me. I told him to duck off. This was the first date. He backed off. Then tried it again a few minutes later. I yelled at him again and got off the car. He yelled back, saying he only took me out to have sex with me. I was astonished and so angry. He got in the car and drove off, leaving me alone in a cemetery. And it was getting dark. I had to walk all the way back into town and use a payphone to call a friend to come get me. I didn't date again for years. I went on a date with a girl whose name I can't for the life of me remember. Since I only remember her as Egg. If you've seen Arrested Development you'll get the reference. Anyways. We went to a crappy little pizzeria, per request. And then just kind of sat there. I'd ask a question. She'd either nod or reply monosyllabically. She alternated between staring at her pizza and staring at my face. I think she maybe took 3 bites of the pizza. Then threw the rest out. It was painfully awkward. I walked her back to her dorm and that was the end of the night. At like 8 PM. Anyways. We hooked up at the club on a later night. Because college. Blind date set up by a friend for me. The girl was cute. I kinda liked her. We started to get along while having dinner. I did not know his brother was sitting near. It's kinda weird, but I can understand that maybe he's trying to protect her or something like that. He finally approached us, tagged along and took a seat beside her. They started having sweet moments. I guess that's okay. Sibling love? She wrote a note at a napkin tissue. Passed it to me. It said, "Wanna have a threesome?" I whispered from my seat looking at her and said, "With who?" For some reason I was excited cause I really thought it was gonna be with another girl that's gonna suddenly pop up anywhere or just waiting for us at her place. She pointing her eyes to her brother. Sitting beside her. Oh man, I don't know if this qualifies to cringe-inducing date, but I cringed so hard I could not move anymore. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I got horny when we were getting along. I even told myself I'm gonna do everything to get laid with her tonight. But I was in shock. So I just grabbed the check and said, "I gotta go." I forgot the excuse I made. P.S. She was really attractive. She looked like she's girlfriend material. But man, those kind of things. I gotta pull the plug. Probably the date I didn't realize was a date until right before. An old friend from high school asked me to get coffee with him. To which I responded, I am not a coffee person, because I'm not. He suggested lunch then. Okay, sure, sounds good. I mentioned to a guy I was talking to that I was going to go meet up with a friend. He started asking questions. He and I were not anything official yet, but we were fooling around. After just a couple questions, who, where, why, he asked why I felt the need to inform him I was going on a date. I said I wasn't. He outlined to me how this is exactly how one asks someone out on a date and the light turned on. I had not been on the dating scene for long at that point and was genuinely oblivious. I thought this guy just honestly wanted to get lunch and catch up. I felt like a ducking dunce, but I didn't want to cancel last minute or just not show up. So I went. And made it super awkward by making sure to mention at any slightest semblance of relevancy that I was seeing someone I was interested in. Part of what I've been up to. etc. I told the server to split our check and we did end up hanging out again after that. But it was clearly not what he had been expecting. At a movie with my first girlfriend. On the way out, we were discussing the movie, when all of a sudden she says, "What side of the Civil War would you be on?" Nervously, I responded with, "The Union?" She said, out loud with people around, "I would have joined the Confederates because slaves weren't that bad." I dumped her 2 days later. Met someone online. Chatted back and forth for a week or so. Decided spur of the moment to go see a movie together. I picked her up and tried to make conversation during the drive. But everything was one-word answers or non-committal grunts. I simply couldn't pry any hint of a personality from this woman. She fell asleep during the movie. People several rows away were looking because they could hear her snoring. This was during the climax of some summer blockbuster or other. By the way, dropped her off after the movie and that was that. At least she got a decent nap, I guess. This one didn't happen to me, but it happened to a friend. She met him from OKC and he tried to make her laugh with an Alan Partridge impression. Having managed to make her politely giggle once, he continued in the Alan Partridge impression for the rest of the date. Whenever she tried to change the subject, he would answer as Alan Partridge. When he made his order, he did it as Alan Partridge. When he finally said he needed to go to the toilet, he did it as Alan Partridge. My friend miserably waited for him to come back. When he arrived back at the table, he seemed surprised. "You're still here?" he said. "Yes," said she. "People usually leave when I go to the toilet." Posted this a few times here. I went on a first meetup with a guy I met on a dating app. Conversations weeks before the coffee meetup was nothing out of the ordinary. We shared the same interest and worked in the same industry. But I should have noticed the first red flag when I told him I needed a rain check on our coffee date the day before because of car issues, and he gave me a bit of a sulky attitude about it. Something about clearing his shit. Anyway, I made it work. Met him at a local ice cream and coffee shop and we spoke for a good hour or so. When it was getting dark, he asked me if I wanted to do dinner that evening. I said yes. The moment we stepped out of the shop, the guy's attitude makes a turn for the worse. While he was all mild-mannered and politely spoken at the shop, he started to cuss out more as we were walking. I never pointed out a place to eat, but he started to tell me as we walked a row of restos and eatery how he doesn't get why women like this fancy and expensive shit. I know of a really cheap taco place nearby and suggested it. To which he told me we are going Dutch, but the way he said it sounded really rude. Whatever, at this point I wanted to end the date already and get over it. Got to taco shop. I buy my taco around $6.50 or something and his cost about $7.50 or similar, which he absolutely flipped when he realized his was $1 more. More sulking. More cussing. He also seemed annoyed I know my sheet when it came to my profession at work. I was thinking since we worked at the same industry, we'd click in that conversation. Nope, he was sulky. Annoyed at most. After dinner, I politely ended the date. Walked him to the trolley and left, never looking back. When he kissed me goodnight on our second date, he said he loved me. I was freaked the duck out and told him he barely knew me. The next day I told him that I didn't think we were going to work, and he proceeded to text me poems and telling me that he was extremely jealous of who I end up with. Thinking about it makes me cringe. Rock climbing date. The guy had told me previously that he was a comfortable and experienced climber. So I asked if he wanted to have our first date at an indoor climbing center. And he agreed. I arrive. See him and realize he has no gear. He makes up some story about having left it at home. And rents the stuff instead from the gym. We go to a wall and I ask if he wants to be on belay. I can tell by his face that he has no idea what I mean, and I just assume it's called something different in this country. But as I hand him the robe, I immediately realize he has no idea what he's doing. He's never climbed before and had been hoping to fake it. I don't know how he thought he'd be able to do that. But I just instantly realized that this guy was totally okay with putting my life at risk, and that was reason enough for me to put an end to things. TBF though, I let him climb a few times to at least make use of the time he'd bought at the gym. And then had a really awkward "please don't lie about this kind of thing again, goodbye." I have one story a date of mine told me when we exchanged bad date stories, and his one. Jimmy meets a girl on a dating app. Can't believe he scored a young beautiful blonde gal willing to date him. He sees himself as average with a bit of a height issue. Conversations were great and time to move on to meeting in person. He suggested a nearby restaurant. Went to meet her, and who does he see? The girl accompanied by her mother. Weird and creepy. But he pushed the thought, being the girl was pretty and she's meeting a man from online. Maybe mama was making sure she won't get kidnapped or anything. Fair excuses. They sat down. Gave introductions, however before they can even order, mom slips the guy a 5-page paper packet. It was a questionnaire asking him about his name, blood type, any medical criminal history. The sheet was worse than those forms you fill out on a doctor's appointment. The girl you would think would be horrified about this. But Jimmy said she just sat quietly as her mom did all the talking. He scanned through the form and sheet got weirder with questions like, when you plan to have sex with my daughter? Preferred sexual position etc. Jimmy was done. So he excused himself to go to the bathroom. On his way there he passed by a server whom he begged to be let out of the employee entrance in the back. He even bribed the guy $20 so he can slip out. He told me he got home and a few days later removed the girl from his contact list.